Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us again, to those watching live and those watching in the future. Today we're going to take a little departure from the normal discussions that we've had, and I'm going to interview Jesse about his sort of business ventures and what he's up to. And, I guess putting it maybe in a little bit of context of what we have been talking about, because I think this whole awakening has led to a lot of the decisions that he's made in why he started, what he's doing, and all that stuff. So I think keep the introduction short and maybe start with a little background of, you're in New York. What are you doing? And then, before you move to Ecuador, you're in New York, in the real estate game. What does that look like?
Sure. So yeah, I'm living in Brooklyn at the time. Got into real estate in Brooklyn in like 2010 or not. Yeah, in 2010. I had found this neighborhood. Some of you may be familiar with it, Bed-Stuy or Bedford-Stuyvesant, in Brooklyn, that I felt like was about to pop. Through sort of miraculous events, was able to pick up a building and then a second one in that neighborhood. It was one of those sort of can't miss opportunities where everything was lining up. The neighborhood had all of the signs of, the next neighborhood to go. I'm not going to get into all the reasons for that now. Came up with a model there of how to own property that was a lot less risky, namely in the sense of having people lose their income and not be able to pay their rents. So I came up with a sort of a model that I thought worked really well, did work really well, was sort of very successful in the small way that I was in Brooklyn with those couple of buildings. And was well on my way to, being a little bit of a Brooklyn real estate mogul. Obviously, that's a little tongue in cheek. But was well on my way there to big things in real estate in New York. And then had this awakening that we've talked about, I think maybe in the first or second show, where I just realized that, everything I was doing made no sense. And ultimately what was so cool about it too, was that what I realized later was that the sort of instant success that I had there was really just to give me the capital I needed to come to Ecuador and do what I ended up, starting here. But yeah, I realized back in, 20, wherever that was, started studying, learning about everything. At the time I was getting an MBA, I was investing in real estate in New York, and we were living in Brooklyn, and, none of those things really made sense to me anymore in the context of what I felt like, where I felt the world was headed. And so, sold my buildings in 2013 and moved to Ecuador.
So why Ecuador? What attracted you there? What did you think that what did you think the opportunities were, and why such a big jump?
Yeah, so at that time I had a list. I could probably remember most of it, as far as what I was looking for, and you were obviously involved in that process. You probably remember better than I do, but it was sort of didn't want to be right on the ocean because of a tsunami, even though now all I want to do is be on the ocean, but I didn't want to be right on the ocean. Didn't want to be on a major fault line, didn't want to be near nuclear power, wanted a year-round warmth, didn't want winter, was looking for, safety, was looking for a place that was easy to immigrate to, was looking for low population density, great air, great water, great soil. Those were kind of at the top of the list. And it was really Southern Ecuador was the only place that sort of hit on everything. I looked around on the internet in, other places, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, probably Panama. I mean, a whole bunch of places, and everything had its issues. You know, it was either winter or it was major earthquake zone, or there was always an issue somewhere. It was really just Southern Ecuador, in the mountains in Southern Ecuador that kind of hit on everything. So that was the initial push towards Ecuador. Of course, the overall push was this community idea, which we may get into, but that was specifically why Ecuador.
Yeah, well, talk about the community idea because yeah, I remember part of this, but obviously I'm interviewing you. So, but yeah, talk about the community idea because I think I remember that was sort of the driving initial idea that may or may not have played out initially. But talk about that idea and what the plan was for that.
Sure. So basically, me and you, Asher, are sitting around in my in my office and going back to, I don't know when that would have been, like 2011, 2012, probably not past, yeah, somewhere in there. And we're in our Alex Jones phase, right? As we've talked about a number of times. And I guess this must have been post Vermont. Yeah, it had to be post Vermont because we were originally thinking we'd get all set up like in Vermont and stuff like that. But then that became not as ideal for us. And so we started looking at, we're thinking about what should we do anyway. So I'm sitting in my office with you in whenever that was, and it kind of hit me. What are we like that we're on the wrong track. We're really thinking in terms of survival, and we're thinking in terms of, we're in our Alex Jones phase, so we're thinking in terms of survival. We're thinking in terms of how do we get enough food, how do we get security, how do we get energy, how do we let's get all the guns and all this kind of stuff, right? And it sort of hit me like that's not really the right track. The right track is to create something completely new. I did understand by that time a little bit. I understand a lot better now, but I did understand a little bit at that time about frequency and about how this whole sort of reality works, where frequencies need to be close enough to each other in range to be able to connect in order to interact with one another. And so the idea, the push to fight back against the powers that be idea, that's why it's absurd, because all you're doing is connecting to that energy and actually feeding more into it. You're actually creating a stronger energy field, by fighting back against the powers that be. What you need to do is create something completely new, something that's up here, something that's not connected to that people can sort of fall into frequency wise, energetically, and then create that new energy on the planet. So that was the idea that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I remember the moment it happened. I'm in that chair, you're in the other chair, and I said to you, hey, like what if we go to South America? We find some country in South America that's less controlled than the United States is, and we buy a big piece of land. And through the infrastructure, we set up a community. I hate that word, but we set up a community where all of these best practices, all of these sort of 5D ideas that we've been learning about for the last couple of years can get implemented in one place. And then from there, we can create sort of a standard of living, or if you want to talk about another way, a frequency that's so elevated, that's so amazing, and then what can we do with that? Our people are going to be looking in at that sort of lady in her garden, humming, having fun all day, feeling great, going, what is she doing? How is that working? And sort of part of that, and then you can hand that to them, right? You can hand them that model. Maybe you expand geographically, maybe you connect with other points on the planet, maybe it becomes a model that you can hand off to other people. So it was really a save the world kind of idea. Let's see, there's one other quick thing I wanted to add to that, but something about the lady in her garden. Yeah, I don't remember, but that was sort of the driving force, and that was what brought me to Ecuador.
Well, yeah, and I remember it from a it's like a flip in your mindset of like, you gotta get all your food, you gotta get all your this, you gotta hoard it into a place so that you can live off of that. And that model is sort of like an enclosed one where, you know, you're just doing everything for yourself, and it's, you know, really unsustainable in the long term. You know, it might, you might get through a tough 3 months or something like that, but really unsustainable in the long term. And the key is to develop the systems that you'll need perpetually to sustain life and a happy, you know, happy existence and all that stuff. So I think that was a mindset flip that we had at that point. And yeah, things were a lot more positive at that point. Because yeah, you know, before that it was the Alex Jones phase. So yeah. So all right, so let's fast forward.
I wish I could like imitate voices better. So every time we said that, I could chime in with like, but I just am not that good at that.
Right. I know. Yeah, I wish I could too. All right, so I'm sure you went through a bunch of stuff to, you know, get your papers all set and all that stuff. But so you come to Ecuador, and then what happens?
all hell breaks loose. No, I came to Ecuador. Yeah. So really, you know, I came with a mutual friend of ours. Of course, as you know, the three of us went to high school together, and we traveled around the country for a few weeks. We ultimately settled in the Loja Vilcabamba area. That's Loja for those at home. The Loja Vilcabamba area. Right, Loja, right. And we settled in the Loja Vilcabamba area, which is really where we expected to. That was sort of the planned end of our trip. Turned out to be, you know, as expected. Vilcabamba specifically, Loja is a 250,000 person city. Vilcabamba is like a 6,000 person town. Very, very fascinating town. It's a high vibe town. It really is. Maybe I've never been out there, but maybe compared to, in certain ways, like to somewhere like Sedona, Arizona, or, you know, different places on the globe that sort of attract a certain tribe, a certain, you know, group, a certain kind of people. Vilcabamba, Ecuador is every bit that times a million. It's a pretty interesting place. So we settle in Vilcabamba, or actually I end up in Vilcabamba. Darnell, our friend, ends up in Loja. And we immediately set about, you know, looking for this land for this project. We spent about a year looking for the land. That was a funny process, which I won't get into, but we spent about a year looking for the land, and then we find it and buy it. And then through that process, that year-long process, we realized, wow, there's an enormous opportunity here in the real estate market to sort of bridge current practices at that time with sort of standardized international practices of selling real estate, and basically allow buyers and sellers to find each other in a somewhat standardized you know, way that works, where the sort of cultures internationally as well, that the cultures can interact. But even local buyers, I mean, back then it was like, if you wanted to find property, you basically had to travel to these towns and like talk to the taxi drivers and like talk to people in the town and like find out, you know, what's for sale, because very little of it was on the internet. And then even once you found it, the process, the due diligence, and all that stuff was quite a challenge, especially if you didn't know what you were doing, which obviously we didn't. And so, you know, we saw that opportunity. It was really Darnell's idea to launch the real estate company. So we launched Abundant Living Ecuador, which I no longer run day to day, but still have that company. And we're actually, we're in a bit of a boom here now since COVID, which is kind of funny. But we launched Abundant Living Ecuador, a real estate company. At that time, we were doing relocation services and all kinds of other stuff. And we, you know, we set out sort of realizing. Say again?
What do you mean relocation services?
We're not doing this anymore, but we had a package where clients loved it, but we just got sick of doing it. But we had this package where people could pay us, you know, not a huge fee, and then we would take care of everything. So the visa and the container and getting bank accounts and cell phones and getting their shipping container down and getting their driver's license and finding housing and blah, blah, you know, all the stuff that that you need help with as a foreigner moving here. So we were, at that time, we called ourselves a real estate and relocation services company or something like that. And so we were doing that. And then we did that for a number of years. It was an interesting time because we launched that into like basically the equivalent of 2008 in the US, but worse. We launched that into just the president at that time, Rafael Correa, who was very ideologically aligned with Hugo Chavez and Cuba and China. He was appointed for 2 years, then elected for 4 years. Those first 6 years were great, as they often are under socialism, because they're doing all kinds of infrastructure and, spending. So he basically brought the country,
until other people's money runs out.
Exactly. And so, but he hadn't gotten super crazy either. Like he was, his rhetoric was a little like strange, but he hadn't done a lot. He really hadn't done anything crazy. So the first 6 years were pretty good. His last term, when he had nothing to lose kind of thing, he went for it. And when he went for it, he destroyed the country. So he had a proposal for a 75% capital gains tax on real estate. He had a proposal for a 75% inheritance tax. The day that he made, so we launched in January of 2014. In spring of that year, I think it was April, so a few months later, he made those two proposals and the country died. like anyone who had money in the country, if they were Ecuadorian, they were sending it to their bank accounts overseas, and if they were foreigners, they were literally leaving. It was very bad. So there was, and that lasted a long time because, of course, all the international press picks it up, as they should. I mean, I considered leaving. Not that I hadn't seen the writing on the wall, but I felt very guided to be here, and so I stuck it out. But it was not unsurprising to me that he was doing stuff like that at all. So we launched into that. The first few years were very tough. And then he left office at the end of 2016. And then things got better. The next president came in, got rid of all the crazy stuff. And then, we were able to sort of operate, but yeah, that's kind of story. And then we've been running that, Darnell, not anymore, but we've been running that real estate company since then. And we now have, a big team, and we've expanded a bit geographically, and we've really been able to help a lot of people over the years.
So who are your ideal clients for those, or who looks for your services for now? I know you don't do the relocation package, but like who would be interested in contacting you, using you?
Yeah, so I mean, we do business both with locals and foreigners. We sort of gear our business towards foreigners, but locals find us as well. So we do, we definitely have a lot of just local market stuff, but we do a lot of business with both expats who, would be expats, people from largely the States and Canada, but certainly Europe as well, who basically are where we were at, right, in 2012. They see the writing on the wall. They understand where we're at here. They know it's coming, and they want out. That's a lot of, we do business with a lot of people like that. A lot of regular people too, but a lot of people too who are not in that world, who are just, wanting to retire or looking for a lifestyle change or are on a fixed income. And I mean, Ecuador is incredibly inexpensive. I mean, your typical lunch here, which comes soup, main course, drink, is around $2.50, $3. You can rent like the most luxurious house in the area for about $1,000 a month. For half that, you have a beautiful house. For $500 a month, you can have a pool and you can have a beautiful house. It's very inexpensive to live here. So there's definitely people who are moving for those reasons. And then we deal with a lot of investors as well. So a lot of people who are looking to get into agriculture, something we've gotten into as well pretty extensively. But people who are looking to get into agriculture, are looking to diversify investments, are looking to hold overseas property, things like that. So it's a pretty diverse mix. But I'd say probably the people we do the most business with are families with kids who want to make a change, like are just kind of looking at the writing on the wall where they live and thinking, I think I could do a little better somewhere else. And retirees. That's probably the two biggest.
Mhm. And so they come to you and they say, we're interested in relocating to Ecuador. Can you help us find a property, a house? Are they looking for land? Are they looking for a community? Are they looking to move toward close to people that are like them?
Everybody's looking for something different. It's like we get phone calls and emails that are, I really want to move to Ecuador, but I don't want to be near any foreigners. We get those kinds of, and that's easy. There's places all over this country like that, and we work in them. Other people, yeah, they want the community, right? So that's sort of in our region. That's really Vilcabamba, and a lot of people are called to Vilcabamba and come specifically for that reason. That's great. Other people, yeah, some people are looking for houses, close to town. I don't want to be more than, let's say, 20 minutes from town or even 10 minutes from town. Other people want rural, other people want to really be out there and be more immersed with the locals and more immersed with nature. There's really everything. So, and we sell a lot of properties that are just massive, right? Let's see, in acres, between, let's say, 100 and 2,000 or even 5,000 acres. We sell a lot of properties like that. We sell others that are, tiny little lots close to town that build a nice house on or already have a nice house on, and do this sort of, communal thing. So it's really just the type of person and what they're looking for. And we work in kind of all ends of that market. We also help a lot of people get set up with their projects. Like a lot of people, want to do an avocado farm, or they want to do, a cacao farm, or, or whatever kind of agricultural idea they have. And so we'll help them find the land. We'll help them get all the workers together. We'll help them come up with a good plan, find the providers of all the equipment and all of the seeds and all of the, everything they need, put them in touch with the expertise. We don't oversee those things directly, but we've helped a lot of people get set up in those things.
So for that, that's the Abundant Living Ecuador, abecuador.com. So if anyone is interested in anything like that, please go there, check it out. And then what are some other projects you got going on, or the other things you're involved with?
Sure. So yeah, so the last couple of years, I've really stepped away from the real estate company. I still, I'm sort of in an advisory role at this point. I still put in, a good 5 or 10 hours a week on it probably. But I'm no longer involved. I don't see properties anymore. I'm not involved in sales. I don't deal with clients. I'm not really directly involved, other than, if there's an issue, or I do a lot of the marketing stuff, and I help with the overall direction. I help some with the hiring and things like that. But yeah, in general, I've freed up my time to focus more on, residential development projects, as well as agriculture. And that's, more of a passion of mine. It's really fun. So we basically, what we do in general, and each project varies a little bit, but basically what we do is we buy, usually pretty decent sized pieces of land in different areas. So some, like the first one we did was in Vilcabamba, really close, only a 3 or 4 minute drive from town. We found this beautiful 7 hectares, which is 14 plus 3.5, 17.5 acres of, totally flat land with river and eucalyptus and bamboo and, nice views. And it was just beautiful, prime piece of land. And we bought it and put in all the infrastructure and subdivided it into small lots, and that's sort of that type of project. And we do it, we try to do them right. We do them right. So we set them up how we want to live in them. So, good water and good infrastructure, and not gated, and no HOAs, and none of that kind of craziness. But a little bit of security, and we do it right. So that was the first one. But then we also do things that are super rural. Like we've got a project right now down in Zumba, which is close to the Peruvian border. Well, close as the bird flies. I think it's still almost an hour in a car, but close to the Peruvian border. I mean, there's like no foreigners out there at all. We sold a couple of properties out there recently. I think it was like literally the first couple of foreigners that had bought out in that region, not in this project, but that bought just properties we had for sale. This is like rural living. So these are much larger. We still buy a big piece and subdivide and set up the infrastructure, but people are living on large properties. A hectare, which is 2.5 acres, would be kind of a minimum. Up to much larger. And what can happen in those is they really can turn into great, thriving communities. So we've done that there. We've got one going right now in Zamora, which is really like the Amazonian region. So really lush and tropical and humid. So, you got to be into that as well. But so we've got one there. And then we've got into agriculture as well. So we closed on a property a few months back to do a big watermelon farm. We're probably going to get into hemp a little bit on that as well. We're probably going to do some avocados on that as well. I've got actually the original property we bought for the original project. We're doing agriculture there. We're in the process of expanding that as well. And sort of the agriculture opportunities here are limitless. I really, I have a dream, which I haven't realized yet, of doing, really like a large superfoods farm and turning that into products for sale, both locally and export. I think that would be really fun. And sort of, the story there is very interesting. It's, in a certain way, it's just kind of an arbitrage play, because, it's like you can go to California, right, or Colorado or Washington or wherever people are really doing this kind of agriculture in the States, and you can buy land and you can get yourself all set up and you can do these kinds of projects there, and they can be great, right? Some of these companies are really profitable and really successful and doing awesome things in the world. But you can do that same thing here, and your labor costs, energy costs, land costs, regulation issues, etc., are like 10%, or 5%, or 20 if depending on what we're talking about. But it's almost sort of an arbitrage play. You can do the, and again, the year-round growing season and no winter, and like it's really ideal. And in a lot of ways, it's another phrase I hate, but it's like an underdeveloped country. The infrastructure is great, so it's not the Rafael Correa did a great job with that. So the infrastructure here is great, but it's not, the investment capital hasn't always been there. And so in major cities and in areas that are popular for investment, super, prices through the roof, heavily developed, all that sort of stuff. But then there's these other places. I mean, there's a place I found like a year ago. It has the exact same characteristics as Napa Valley. I shit you not. Like it's Napa Valley. And they're charging land right there right now is like between $1,000 and $2,000 a hectare. So I don't even know how to convert that to acres, but it's cheap. So
yeah.
What's that?
It could be around $500 an acre.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be less than that, because that would be if it was 2 to 1 and it's 2.5 to 1. So yeah, but like, right, somewhere in there. So it's very inexpensive, and it's cold at night, very hot during the day. It's Napa Valley. And it's just, no one's doing hardly anything out there. So I'm really excited about that. There's stuff all over the Amazonian region that's, again, very inexpensive. If you go to the developed areas, it's very expensive. Like if you want to go to Machala on the coast and buy a banana plantation or a cacao plantation, or up north in Esmeraldas, or where in Ambato, where they do colder weather stuff, you're spending huge amounts of money to get something that's already set up. But if you're willing to take on the setup, which is easy and cheap, you can do really well that way as well. So yeah, so we've gotten into a lot of stuff like that, and that's really, more of a passion of mine for sure.
How have the locals responded to any of the projects that you're working on? Like, do you get a sense that they're welcoming of more development? Especially in the rural areas, are they excited that foreigners are moving in? What's that tenor like?
Yeah, I mean, Ecuadorians in general, and we could do a 5-hour podcast on the Ecuadorian culture. So I'll try and keep I don't want to make this too long of an answer, but in general, and there's downsides and dark sides to the culture, like there is anywhere in the world. But excuse me. But in general, Ecuadorians are really cool people. There's not a lot of pretense and there's not a lot of preconceived notions amongst Ecuadorians. So they're just not as programmed as we are, in general. And so they take you as you are. So if you're an asshole, they treat you as such. If you're a good guy, they treat you as such. And that's really just how Ecuadorians are. So, so it took me multiple years. I would say close to 3 years, like at least 2 to 3 years. Now, I didn't speak any Spanish when I got here, so that played into how long that took. But it took me a solid 2 to 3 years to have a good handle on the language and the culture. Things were really difficult until I did. That also coincided with the terrible political stuff and blah, blah, but who knows? But things were really difficult until I did. Once I had a good grasp on the language and had figured the culture out, things got very easy. And that's because, again, Ecuadorians, they have their way of doing things that you need to understand, because it is as different from the US sort of ethos as you can imagine. In many ways, it's opposite. But once you understand that and can just operate within that framework and that context, they're the most loving, kind, accepting people that you will ever meet. They have no these ideas that we have as foreigners about like not being accepted in other countries or something. It just comes from the movies. Like, it doesn't come from them. Like that would be laughable to them. They wouldn't even know what we were talking about if I was to like sit down with an Ecuadorian and interview him, and he'd be like, what? Like it wouldn't even, they don't even have like really a context for that. So yeah, I mean, in general.
Can you give us some examples of the differences that you had to overcome or recognize?
Oh, it's just, I mean, wow. Yes, of course. So in the US, right, the ethos is like individualism, hard work, your word is your bond, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like all these kinds of like things that were. What's that?
I said you sound racist.
Right. Now it's racist, yeah. But but that's sort of like the what we grow up with, and I sort of thought, that's all bullshit. Like, I didn't even think that really meant anything until I lived somewhere else and realized, oh, that actually is legit and means something back home. So here they come from a very different context. So we have this idea in the US that like we're really bad because we had slavery for so long and like so much longer than everybody else. It's total nonsense. They had slavery here basically until the 1970s almost. Now, it wasn't the same type of slavery, but people were essentially bought. There were land barons that originally went right back to Spain, right? Who basically owned the entire country. A handful of families, owned the entire country, and the people who worked the land were bought and sold with the land. I mean, not actually, like, not paperwork. They weren't owned by the landowners, but that's, the land changed hand, the workers stayed, and the workers never owned, they never owned property. And so it goes, a lot of the cultural stuff goes back to the history. So, for example, in the US, even through our most racist and crazy history, right? Even as the most subjugated and persecuted group, you could still put some capital together with your buddies and start a business. You still had economic opportunity. You could still be wealthy. You could still be an entrepreneur. I'm not saying doors weren't closed and all that kind of thing. This is not that discussion, but we always had mobility within the society. Here you did not. Here your blood had to go right back to Spain for you to be able to get title to property. You had to have the right last name. Same thing with getting a license to operate a business. So people didn't have, and in many ways still don't, an entrepreneurial mindset. The way that you got ahead in this culture was through who you marry, what your last name is, what their last name is. And so that persists to this day. So the way that things get done here, period, end of story, is through relationships, not any other way. Nothing else matters. Like, literally, it matters not at all anything else. So that is just the way life works. And so decisions are made communally. There's no privacy. There's no concept of, like, I'll give you an interesting example, right? There's a word here, not egoist. What's the word? Ambitioso. There's a word here, ambitioso, which translates to ambitious, which in English is not a dirty word. Like, there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. Here, the word ambitioso is a what's that?
The requirement to get a date these days with a woman.
Yeah, well, right, or to be successful monetarily, or
yeah,
right. That word here is an insult. It's a dirty word. It's like él es muy ambicioso. It's like he's really ambitious, which means he's greedy and he wants it. You know, it's like this. It's sort of like looked down upon to want money too much and to like these sorts of ideas, right? So that's a very different sort of construct. So people here hide their wealth. They don't show their wealth. People make decisions in groups. There is no individuality. There's no concept of that, even of being like something that's not looked good at. That's not looked at as something positive. That's looked at as like, what's that guy doing over there? You know, if I mean, here's a hilarious example, right? In Loja, in the city that I live near, somebody opened a business called Chess Burger. It was a little fast food joint. Somebody, and this is like common, this is very normal, this kind of thing. Somebody then opened a business literally next door. They touched each other. Guess what they named it? Chess Burger 2. Like, this is the mindset. If something works, like if one person starts an apple farm somewhere, and it's successful, everyone starts an apple farm in that same region, and that just becomes the apple region. It's not because there was any reason. It was just because one person did it. So it's a different animal. It's a different place to live. Now, of course, as a foreigner, and interestingly enough, on that point, which I'll make in a second, Ecuadorians, they go and live in Spain, they go live in the US, and then they come back and kill it because they get all the business ideas and sort of that get up and go sort of foreign mentality. And they already have the cultural know-how and the language from where they're from. And then they come back home and they're just like wheeling and dealing and opening businesses and just killing it. But as a foreigner, it's really easy to be successful here as well if you can learn the culture and the language, which is, you can't be successful without it. But it's really easy to be successful here as well because it's not an entrepreneurially minded society. The opportunities here are just absolutely limitless. Which is really fun. You know, I remember in Brooklyn trying to, you know, all my job all day, every day was like looking for property, right? Because you got to find, you know, I'm looking for these extraordinary opportunities. And, you know, you're fighting with capital from all over the world. Like you're fighting, you know, everybody's looking for those same opportunities. You're trying to muscle out 10,000 Israelis and 4 million Russians and, you know, Chinese money and local money and, you know, money from everywhere. And here, I mean, there's opportunities that are like 10 times gainers, and I just don't have the capital. Like my capital's tied up, you know, and I just can't take advantage of them. But they just sit there. Like Like nobody understands them. They don't get it what it is. Like no one's doing it. It's just, it's unbelievable. So.
Yeah, that must be a little bit frustrating on some level. Cause you know, for me, it's like, I'm not to the point where I have more opportunities than I know what to do with, but it's getting close to that. You know, more opportunities than either time or money that you have available to you. So, you know, for me, as someone who likes to take advantage of opportunities, you know, that could get frustrating. Like, you know, things aren't moving fast enough and all that stuff. But
yeah.
So that sounds fun. And so talk about the community, and you said you don't like the word community, but like the living development parts that you're involved with. Like, where are they? How do people get involved? What exactly is involved in them?
Sure. So, I mean, each one's a little different. We've actually done a really terrible job of the marketing to date. We're building a new website which is the old website that you gave out is there, and that will just be switched over to the new one. And then the new one will have all the marketing stuff for these projects. But but we've almost just sold them to date. We've almost just sold them to our existing clients and really done almost no marketing on them. But certainly they can get in touch through the website with our team, and those guys can have all that information at their fingertips. But yeah, I mean, basically, they've all worked a little differently, again, depending on where they are, but they've tended to attract people who are into similar stuff. So for example, we did one in Zamora. We're in the process of it now. Excuse me. We actually just sold our first couple of properties out there. It's a small one. I forget if there's 9 or 10 properties on that one. But that one, we didn't put internal roads. We put like walking paths that certainly you could use a dirt bike or even a 4-wheeler. But we actually intentionally set it up that way to then market it towards people who don't want the noise pollution, who want that sort of lifestyle where they can maybe go in and out on a horse or a donkey or on foot, or a 4-wheeler or a electric bicycle or whatever, something like that. But for that sort of person. Yeah. And so that one's really beautiful. Like, it's in the jungle. There's about 100 yards where you walk in, and then the bridge is actually being built right now, where then there's a little bridge that goes over this large, they call it a river, I'd call it a large stream, goes over a large stream, and then then there's fruit trees and forests, and we're talking tropical life. So that's that project. Now, the guy who the first couple of properties that we sold in there, this is a couple in their 30s, maybe early 40s, with 3 or 4 kids, and they're looking for that kind of lifestyle. Really cool people, successful people, not like super hippie, that not there's anything wrong with that either, but very very like business minded people, and but looking for a lifestyle change. And I don't think they're going to live there full time. I think for them that's sort of like a part-time residence. And then I think if I'm not mistaken, our team also, they bought something in closer to Vilcabamba, so they'll kind of have that which is pretty cool. They'll be a couple hours away out in the jungle, and then a couple hours to Vilcabamba to the sort of large community. And but that's a cool area too. In Zamora, you can check that out. Zamora, cool little town close to Loja, but in the jungle in the Amazonian region. So that's that project. The other one, like I mentioned, in Vilcabamba, we sort of took the best practices of infrastructure, of semi-gated community. So it has a little security, has a little bit of has a gate and things like that, but no guard, none of that, really gated community stuff that causes problems. No HOA, none of that, no boards, no voting, none of that stuff. But we took sort of those best practices, put it on a beautiful piece of land close to town where people could just, live a peaceful life with great neighbors. The people that have bought in there, a lot of them have actually been locals. And of course, a couple of foreigners as well. Has the river, that sort of stuff. So, you can contact us and find out about all those things. The one in Zumba, we're just starting the infrastructure on that one, so that's a little bit further out, but that's a really beautiful piece of land. I mean, just the visuals on it are just, it's breathtaking. And that's really remote, really rural. So I think that community, which will be a little bit larger, I think somewhere around 20 properties are coming out of that one. That one will probably be a little bit more communal in the sense of, people growing food and trading with each other and getting together, and there'll be swimming holes and that we create in the infrastructure. There'll be swimming holes, and there'll be, little communal areas and things like that, which I'm excited about that stuff as well. And then really the one I'm most excited about is we're not doing it really for profit. That's more of a lifestyle thing. Is the one that we came to do initially, which got backburnered for many years, and we're just getting back to in the last handful of months.
Piece of land.
What's that?
That original piece of land.
That original piece of land. Yep. So right now, all that's out there is some agriculture. Actually, we just started harvesting the first harvest of this. It translates to tree tomato, tomate árbol. It's like a juicing tomato. It's hardly related to tomatoes really, but it's we just started harvesting. We're doing some more agriculture now, and in the next few months we'll be putting the road in and really getting started. We want to do the plans are really fun. First of all, it's 200 hectares, so it's 500 acres. There's 2 lagoons. There's 5 streams that borders a river. There's let's see, of the 200 hectares, about 80 of them are old growth forest. The rest is usable, not all flat enough to be usable, but there's about 80 hectares that are usable, flat enough to build on, and then 80 hectares that are just literally original forest, has never been cut. Really incredible. All the water. I mean, it's cool. It's a cool climate. It's up around 7,000 feet, but it connects to, behind it is protected forest all the way to the Amazon. And so, all the water, like most of the water originates on the property, but the river, for example, comes out of that, protected forest. There's parrots, there's bears, there's monkeys. I mean, it's very, very cool. But it's really close to the city as well. So it's kind of that best of both worlds type deal. And so what we want to do out there is sort of, there's this spot that if you look to the right, it looks out over the whole valley of Loja, of the city. And then you look to the left, you're looking into the forest, into just mountains and forest. We're in the mountains here. We're in the Andes. So we want to do a farm to table restaurant, and then sort of like a little event center, and then a spa kind of healing center. And the land is very healing. Like everyone I take out there, and me for sure, but everyone I take out there is just like, oh, it feels so good here. It's really that kind of property. Like it's really the right property for that. And then from there, we'll start developing out the sort of residential side, which we're really hoping to implement everything, the energy solutions totally off grid, totally, all that stuff. But we'd really like to get some sort of, Tesla technology in there. If we have to start with micro hydro and those sorts of things, we will. But I'd love to get some really, really 5D stuff going out there. And that's actually happening now. So that's exciting. I'm excited about it.
That's awesome. That sounds really exciting. A lot of fun. I'm sure a lot of people would have a lot of fun there. You talked a little bit about security, like, gated communities. What type of need is there for that kind of stuff?
Sure. I mean, part of that depends on what kind of world we're headed towards here too, right? But the Ecuador in general is very safe. Like it's statistically, it's the third safest country in South America behind Chile and Argentina. It's pretty safe. I'm sorry, not in South America, in Latin America, because all of Central America is more dangerous essentially than South America. But it's pretty safe. And then this region that we're in is the safest region of Ecuador as well. So, comparing it, for example, to New York City, which has a reputation of not being safe, that probably comes from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but is actually statistically one of the safer cities in America.
In the last year or so.
What's that? Yeah, right.
Yeah, till the last year or so.
That's right. And we'll get less and less. But going back to my time there was one of the safest cities in the US. I watched myself much more in New York than I do here. I'll walk around Loja, the city here. I'll walk around anytime, night or day, phone in hand, computer even, and wouldn't worry about it at all. That being said, the crime here is different. So you're much less likely here to be the victim of violent crime than you are back home, but you're much more likely to be the victim of like petty theft. Like people will just take shit, so you need like a scary looking dog basically. And like, you just need like a small deterrent so that people don't opportunistically kind of like see what they can grab or type of thing. That's just sort of, and that goes back to the history we were talking about, right? That's how you get ahead. Like when you have an opportunity to sort of, everybody savors here too. That's interesting. You'll find a lot of guys that, they've got $5 million worth of properties and they pull up in a 30-year-old pickup truck. They're missing half their teeth and they get out of the car in clothes that looks like they haven't changed in 6 months. They're rich. I mean, when you consider like $5 million here, multiply that by 4 or 5 for what that's worth here versus the States. So, they are wealthy. We're talking like, $20 million type, back home. And they look like they're totally impoverished. So people save, people hoard. There's not money velocity. Like there's no money velocity. Everybody's just like, so So people will take stuff, it's very much a culture of like, that's like the dark side of the culture is like, you kind of like get what you can mentality. Not everybody, of course, there's lots of amazing, honorable people, but culturally that's, much more the norm. So you need to have a little security, more so deterrence, just so that no one kind of like comes on your land and takes stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, I've been to places that have, they've said they've been unsafe. I'm thinking like Kingston, Jamaica. That's one of the probably the dangerous cities out there. And I've been to all different kinds of places there, and probably high crime neighborhoods in there as well. But if you're with the right group of people, locals, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. So, you got a lot of projects going on, agriculture, community building, and just sort of regular plots that you're parceling out from bigger areas. So yeah, let's give people your contact again if they want to get in touch with you. It sounds like, if people are looking to relocate, it sounds like this would be a ideal place to. I remember when we were looking for places to go, like you said in the beginning, it checked off a lot of those boxes. And, so we, especially Jesse, has done a lot of research into this. So if that's something that, a listener of this would be interested in, definitely check it out. It sounds like they're doing some really great stuff there. So is the best to send people to your website, abecuador.com?
Yeah, I mean, I can give out my email. My email is Jesse. Should I do that? Yeah, fine, it's fine. Jesse, JESS. I actually I keep my email off the website now, and there were some years there where it was like I was working like 16 hours a day just trying to keep up with everything. And then about a year or two ago, I transitioned to just doing my stuff and hiding from the rest of it. So I gave my old phone number to my team, which was like bzz, 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 all day long on WhatsApp. And I don't give my number out anymore. My website's no longer, my email's not on the site anymore and all that kind of stuff. But people can reach me at Jesse, JESSE, at A as in Apple, B as in boy, Ecuador, which is EC, not EQU, which we get sometimes, Ecuador.com. And yeah, that's probably the best way to reach me. And of course, the website's good for, my team as well, and properties and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, just one other note I'll throw out there, probably our biggest challenge, I would say, one of them for sure, maybe the biggest, I'd say, is finding good people who are passionate, competent, smart, speak Spanish ideally, and want to execute on some of these things that I'm talking about. We're capped more so by personnel than we are capital. like we have investors, but I keep kind of being like to get into other stuff because it's really hard to find good people. That's really the biggest challenge, because you kind of need somebody with a foreign mindset in a certain way, and they can be Ecuadorian. Of course, we work with lots of Ecuadorians, but they sort of have to have that mindset of understanding business and how to execute in that sort of way. But at the same time, they have to have the local sort of ability to operate within this context. Really challenging. So if you're someone who has some expertise or has some interest or whatever, and there's certainly things we can teach, but has anything that you are, or even are just excited by these things and think it might be something you'd want to do, I'd love to chat with you, because we're always looking for good people.
Great. So yeah, I think with that, that's a good place to call it a day. Any last words before we go?
No, that was great, man. Thanks for letting me talk.
Awesome. So yeah, so like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Go to abecuador.com if you're interested in anything that Jesse was talking about, and we'll see you next time.